Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 35 of the PONDCast. I've been able to talk to some of the best experts in the industry and bring you guys some answers to some pretty tough questions, whether that be what the heck is a fish lice, or can we run our pumps in the wintertime, or what's the worst thing that's ever happened when you were on a pond installation and a dude had to basically run away from a bear. This has been a really fun experience, and I've learned more doing this podcast than I ever have with my own hands-on experience. So with that, we are going to end season 2, and we are coming right back with season 3. But before we do that, I want to bring you guys some of my favorite stories from season 2. So here we go. This has been the Webb's Water Garden PONDCast, brought to you by Webb's Online. I'm your host, Justin Skaggs, and a very humble, very appreciative thank you for listening. I did see something online, and I'm sorry I can't give you a shout out because I actually now at this current moment forget who sent this email, but it was a lady from Florida where you were just at actually. Yeah. She said she threw bags of ice in her pond.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point, I mean, I've seen it, I've done it. If you're up, I mean, I've seen ponds 95, which is such a danger zone. You got to get the temperature down quick. Bags of ice, obviously, however the ice was produced, add a conditioner because you're actually adding water into the pond. But yeah, ice is a great way to immediately cool down the pond. And
then, if you guys aren't checking your thermometers consistently, obviously that's going to be an issue as well.
Yeah.
But so the reason I wanted to touch base with you is we've been getting crushed by kind of abnormal heat waves up here on our side. I was just curious what the summer's like and what the temperature's been like over for you guys on the West Coast in the West Coast pond world. And then what it is you kind of do to combat that, or maybe even preventative measures you employ.
Well, our summers are fairly consistent. That we have what's referred to as May gray and June gloom, where the weather's actually counterintuitive. It's overcast and gloomy for the most part during those months until like midday at least. So the heat really doesn't come until about July, and then lasts through October, which is the tail end of it is what was traditionally fire season. But now the rules, the traditional rules don't necessarily apply. So working out in the valleys and the desert, obviously, is a much different ball game than versus the Hollywood side of the hills. And the biggest problem that I've encountered traditionally is clients are inclined to have overstocked ponds, as much as you would, dissuade them from doing that. And when you do that, it's just it's a potential disaster in the making if your infrastructure fails. And with our notorious rolling blackouts that we have here at the worst possible times.
I got to tell you, from Pennsylvania, I didn't even know that was a problem y'all had.
We haven't had it so much in the past few years. It's very much like what New York is experiencing now, just under the grips of what's renowned to be basically a third world level of infrastructure with our grid. What was it back like 10 years ago, that East Coast blackout that was due to a tree branch stuck in a power line in Cleveland?
Yeah, I remember that.
That should never happen. But it's the equivalent, it gets hot here, everyone has their ACs on, and then the whole system buckles. So when situations like that occur, it's always when it's at its hottest. And I always encourage koi pond owners to have a backup generator. Most don't, but in the event of a fire and an evacuation and a power outage, the rolling blackouts, etc., it's indispensable. Otherwise, you're going to have mass die-offs, particularly in an overpopulated pond.
So yeah, these the motors that are used in external pumps, or horizontal centrifugal pumps, to use a more broad term, they're meant for continuous duty Most of these motors have an enclosure around there that's labeled a TEFC, a totally enclosed fan-cooled motor. And it's totally designed around operating in a regular atmospheric condition, not underwater, like a submersible pump would. So two big differences in the pump types, right? And as we're focusing on external pumps, where you install these for your pond or water feature will significantly impact its ability to create a long service life. For instance, if the pump is in a vault below ground and it is the lowest point of the geography around you, in a rainstorm, you're in a place that has a lot of weather, a lot of rain, a lot of snow that will collect in this low point. You have the ability to flood that pit. And these motors, what we say is they can take a shower. They're built for, getting water on top of them, but they're not built for being submerged or taking a bath. So, the first rule of thumb is where you're looking at placing your pump, obviously it has to be optimal to work with the system, but you don't want to put it in a place that'll flood, right? It can take a shower, just not a bath. So that's a pretty important consideration there.
Well, Microblift has a product called Autumn Winter Prep, and for larger pond, it's the Winterizing kit. And this is to treat your pond with bacteria that is able to withstand temperatures down to 40 degrees. Now that's the maximum that you're going to get anything out of bacteria. This is not, we don't import it from the Arctic, or I'll just say that.
Gotcha. All right.
But it is, this is a 4-month treatment, which usually will take people through their winters. The biggest target is leaves. Leaves can become toxic in a pond. I've heard people who call me and they say, well, I think I should leave leaves in the bottom for frogs. No, you shouldn't do that.
All right.
No, leaves, as they begin to, if you do that, as they begin to break down they're slow to degrade, but as they do, they give off gases. And the gases are not good. One of the end results is methane. And that is a definite fish killer. So
so we're not worried about the frogs. We're worried about the methane. We got to keep that out for the fish.
Oh, that'll kill frogs as well.
See, the frog's got no win here. That's what I'm thinking of.
The idea here is that this is not a natural pond. This is not an earth pond.
Right.
So it doesn't break down in the normal way that an earth pond would have an interaction with the bottom, with the substrate. So you've got a rubber bottom on this pond or a concrete bottom on the pond, and it doesn't allow for that interaction with the earth.
So another interesting piece of science is the thermocline. Water is not, it just doesn't really act like anything else on the planet. So different temperatures of water actually are different weights. So in the summertime, the colder water is at the bottom and the warmer water is at the top. But that actually switches, because at a certain point, the colder water, once it gets towards freezing, becomes lighter and goes up towards the top. So the thermocline switches in the winter, meaning that there's warmer water at the bottom, and the fish are obviously, inclined to interact with that differently. So, how is a fish going to act in this environment?
They'll pretty much stay towards the bottom, dormant, motionless. They may look dead, but they're not. You may see their fins just move a little bit. You may actually see them come up towards the surface around a de-icer because it's warmer in that one location. But don't worry when they're relatively at the very bottom. They're completely safe, harmless, fine, nothing to worry about.
Yeah, and about one time every year, maybe every other year, we get a phone call where somebody's trying to go in there and check on these fish, and they're not going to do anything when you get down there. They're literally like, it's like a bear hibernating.
Yeah, and it may look like that whole pond is frozen because it's motionless, it's crystal clear, but the ground itself is insulation. So it stays, unfrozen towards the very bottom.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's going to be the biggest reason I find where aeration works, like why it works so well, is because you'll see ponds in people's backyards or, at different parks where without aeration, if it is staying stagnant, it turns into a science project at the blink of an eye. Whereas if you're utilizing some of these aeration systems and have just that water flowing, that constant movement, you're disrupting that. You're not allowing it just to sit there and gain that sunlight and to just keep growing and growing. So with that constant movement, whether it be from circulating the water at the top with those floating, or pushing air and disrupting it from the bottom and circulating, flipping the pond over that way, that's going to be crucial. That's the crucial way to keep a lot of that growth from occurring.
So this is definitely helpful, and I think what I'm really gaining from you is not all aeration systems are going to be made equal or for the same purpose. So I think this is actually a really good time to kind of put a cap on this and have you tell everyone where they can reach you if they have any further questions, because
Definitely.
it might just be tell me what you're trying to build kind of thing right now, right? So why don't you sludge as just a concept, something that like you attack or you try to create, and it's really important right now during the fall season, because anything that isn't turned into sludge can't be absorbed, and then therefore will make for a dirtier, messier pond through the winter, dirtier, messier pond in the spring, and if I'm not mistaken, it might even create some sort of like toxins for fish and things like that. Pete, I'm just gonna let you take it away. Welcome back to the PONDCast. And thank you very much for your time. Let's see if I can figure this out.
Well, Justin, thanks for having me back. So let's talk some preventative maintenance as far as pond sludge is concerned.
All right.
Yes, pond sludge is toxic to fish, so we want to find a way to get it out of the pond or absorbed and processed as soon as possible. Now, fall season, we have a lot of organic solids dropping into the pond, as far as pine needles, leaves, twigs, and sticks that may be dropping into the pond. Now, we want all those organic solids to break down as soon as possible. So one thing that we can do to jumpstart and speed up that process is by adding beneficial bacteria to your pond, which comes in either a powder form, you can get it in a liquid form as well. I typically, when I put some in the pond, usually some people put about a teaspoon in every week. Some people put 2 in every week, depending on how much is falling into your pond. So I usually like to stick it in the pond right near the skimmer box. So the skimmer box will absorb it right away and send it right up to your waterfall area. So if you have a biofalls box with filter pads inside, the filter pads are actually creating an area for that beneficial bacteria to colonize, so that when all the nutrients are making their way into the skimmer box and going through your pond tubing and recirculating back up to your waterfall, that beneficial bacteria is basically creating a trap for all the excess, buildup in the pond.
All right, guys, that wraps up our season 2 recap, but have no fear. We are coming right back at you next week with an all new episode with an all new expert, and we are going to ask him the tough questions and keep this thing going. Until next time, take care and enjoy your pond.